I wish I was a demon, then maybe I would get some exercise. Lame joke? Yeah. But these stories are definitely creepy. Demons seem to exist in nearly every culture, in some shape or form. Are they just symbols of the evils and fears of mankind? Or are there really beings out there that love nothing more than to torment us? These are allegedly real encounters with demons and demonic entities. Enjoy, and remember to send us your scary stories at darkstories.org. I'm currently looking for stories about wilderness survival, caves, and outdoors exploration. If you want to support the show, follow the Darkness Prevails podcast on Spotify and iTunes. Thank you. Now, let's begin. I had a demon attachment. From Pink Pepper 78. I believe the house I grew up in is either a portal or a hub of spiritual activity, and growing up there was hell. But I'd never experienced anything quite like this. I was a complicated pregnancy, and I nearly died many times in the first year of my life. This is relevant because my mother believes this is what started the activity in the home. Since one night, she woke up to a group of figures bending over my crib to watch me sleep. I grew up normal. Things happened, sure, but nothing serious or dangerous. I moved out of that house at 15 with my mom. We got an apartment in a different town. My sister, her kids, and my grandmother all still live in the home, and still do to this day. A few years back, my sister was having a joint party for her kids, as they were both born in September. At that point in my life, I hadn't been back in the house for longer than a few hours, ever since we left it. My sister's boyfriend at the time was showing me the work he did. He had finished the addition on our house that had been just bones since I was born, and had now been turned into a shop. He had also added the foundation for a porch off the back, but it was just concrete and wooden beams so far, so they kept the door locked. That way no kids would accidentally fall out the door. Anyway, he wanted to show me, but we needed the key to unlock the door, yet it wasn't where it was usually hung up. We looked around for 5 minutes, but it was nowhere in sight. We even checked the floor, and I crawled behind the stairs because the addition was 2 floors. The second was not finished. Still, there was nothing. We were crouched next to each other. My sister's boyfriend then turns to tell me he's gonna go ask if someone accidentally put it in their pocket or hid it from the kids. Just as he says that, the key drops out of nowhere onto the middle of the floor right between us. We both just looked at each other. He looks at me and says, "She knows you're home." This may sound creepy, but there's this woman in a white dress that used to stand over my crib. She would even wake my mom up in the middle of the night, just before I started to fuss about something. He told me they hadn't seen her since I left, but for 2 days after this encounter, they could see her at night in the upstairs of the addition, rocking in a chair. I don't know why or what she was doing, but that's not even the bad bit. As the kids settled down into a pillow fort in the living room, falling asleep watching movies, the rest of us began to drink a little, watching the fire we'd built and telling our little ghostly experiences. My sister talks about how every once in a while she'll walk past the fridge, and everything on top of it just goes flying off and crashing to the ground behind or in front of her. It always just barely misses her. At around 1 a.m., we finally go to bed. My sister tells me I can sleep in the kids' room since they were all passed out in the living room. The kids' room just so happens to be my old bedroom, and I had never had a bad experience in there before. But for some reason, that night, something decided to make itself known. So I went to bed in my nephew's race car bed. There was a small nightlight in the corner, but other than that, the room was pitch black. I was on my phone for a bit. Then, when I finally decided to go to sleep, I began to get this creep up my spine, like someone was in the room with me. My eyes shot open, and of course, there was no one there. I went to grab my phone, but it was dead, and everyone else in the house was asleep. I tried to settle back in, but as I turned the other way to face the chimney, which ran from the first floor through the second, and was probably about 3 feet wide, all stones and no bricks, I saw a massive shadow. It was from floor to ceiling, and was very clearly a person. It had shoulders and a head, but it didn't move. I tried to find the source of it, see if it was a toy or stuffed animal or a trick of the light, but the shadow remained. At this point, I started to freak out because the creepy feeling was back. I just stared at it, wide-eyed, and for a second I thought perhaps it was my grandfather who passed away before I was born. But I didn't get good vibes from this thing. Eventually, I realized I wouldn't sleep, so I found my niece and nephew's TV, which was tiny and hooked up to an old Xbox, and the only DVD in the room was Planes. Yeah, that movie like Cars, but with planes. I watched it on repeat the entire night, and anytime I dozed off, the movie would end, and I would be wide awake again, starting the movie over. I remember watching the time fly by on the little clock, and the sun slowly beginning to rise. That shadow stayed the entire night, and so did the terrible feeling. Eventually, I could hear my grandmother up, and I ran downstairs, telling her I wanted to go home. I didn't have a car at the time, or else I would have been long gone. I felt drained, sick. I had a headache. I chalked it up to being hungover, and went to sleep the minute I got home. For the next week, I felt off, and on the verge of nausea. I'd randomly get these severe migraines that also made me nauseous. I threw up when I ate, and I just thought I got sick or something, because I am prone to stomach bugs. I thought nothing of it, and eventually everything was fine. I felt fine. But I had this feeling of someone watching me everywhere I went. I didn't have that feeling in the house I lived in before, so this was odd. I met a guy online. After about a month of dating, he stayed over. In the middle of the night, I remember waking up. He was just lying in bed on his back, with his hand behind his head, staring at the bedroom door. I was like, what is it? Because I didn't know if my cat was out there or not. And he says, I've been awake for a while. I feel like something is watching me. I immediately sat up and stared at my door. So it isn't just me, is what I remember thinking. Then suddenly, I got dizzy and nauseous, and felt like I was going to throw up. I curled up and tucked my head between my knees, trying to ground myself and stop the spinning. Then, without even thinking it, without even realizing what I'd said, I spoke. He doesn't like you. My boyfriend turned towards me with wide eyes, obviously concerned and scared. I looked at him and was like, I don't know why I said that. I don't know what's happening. He just got up and shut the door tightly. Then we held each other. The vertigo and nausea continued. Then I was chanting in my head over and over, "You're not welcome here. Leave. very angrily. Soon the vertigo stopped, and the nausea slowly went away, but I had a bad headache. I said, "I think it's okay now." My boyfriend then told me he kept envisioning us in a bubble of light, safe and protected. I haven't had any problems since. I still feel like I'm being watched. I don't know if it's our demon friend or another ghost, as the house we live in now does seem to be haunted. The stuff on the fridge still falls around my sister, so there must be something else trying to catch her attention, unless my demon friend went back to them. And despite my demons, or ghosts, the guy I met online and I have been together for 3 years now, so things are a little less scary. Haunted by Good Intentions, from Itty Bitty Demon. This all began in the summer of 2012. It was in the first apartment that my husband, Jason, and I lived in after we moved clear across the country from Honolulu, Hawaii to Northern Virginia, roughly about an hour south of Washington, D.C. I was working in retail, a full-time student, made some friends, and had finally gotten past the culture shock of being on the East Coast. At the time, living in the unit below us was Amelia and Stacy. I knew Amelia from work, and we became fast friends shortly after Jason and I moved into the apartment. I never met Stacy and only saw her once or twice. Even to this day, even after what happened, I sadly still don't know anything about her. Now, on to the beginning of the actual story. Jason and I were relaxing by watching TV before I had to head into work around 4 p.m. Suddenly, we hear a persistent knocking sound coming from below us, and shortly after it began, the knocking turned significantly more aggressive. It was like someone was absolutely putting all their effort into pounding on a door or a wall. It was seriously loud enough and hard enough to shake the entire apartment. Then, there was an incredibly teeth-rattling boom, followed by silence. After a very pregnant pause, the screaming began. It was this gut-wrenching constant wail of despair that made my heart drop and my stomach clench. There was so much pain in the sound. At this point, Jason and I both knew that the sounds were coming from the downstairs apartment. We had tried to ignore it in the beginning, but that god-awful screaming was so hard to ignore. I was worried about Amelia, since she was a friend of mine, and I hoped she was okay. I figured I could ask her what all of that was about the next time I saw her. As I was leaving for work, there was a fire truck, an ambulance, and multiple cop cars outside of our building. I noticed Amelia in the parking lot, looking so lost and shell-shocked. After speaking with her, I learned that apparently Amelia had not seen Stacy for a few days. She knew Stacy was home since her car was in the parking lot, and her bedroom door was closed and locked. That morning, Amelia knocked on Stacy's door to check on her, but did not receive a response. She did this periodically throughout the day, but still no response. This is when she became concerned. The knocking and pounding that we heard from our apartment was the police doing a welfare check on Stacy. The loud boom was them basically kicking her door down. The pain-filled wailing was Amelia discovering Stacy's dead body. I'm not sure how she died. I'm not sure if it was by natural, criminal, or self-induced means. All I know is Stacy had passed away and was locked in her room for the last few days. Several weeks later, Amelia had approached me and 2 other girls at work, asking if we could help her soon because she was moving out. She said she simply couldn't live in that unit anymore, that she was now afraid to be alone there. She also said that she had not been staying in her apartment for a while now. She said that the apartment was bad luck because someone had died there. She was so deeply disturbed to be there that she was willing to pay the penalties of breaking her lease even though she had renewed her lease shortly before Stacy passed. We three agreed to help. The date was set for next weekend. We would start Friday afternoon and work to get her packed up and all her stuff in the moving truck by Sunday night at the latest. The other girls, Cheryl and Donna, were already at Amelia's apartment by the time I arrived that next Friday. I was surprised to see a huge pile of trash bags lining an empty wall. She said that she was only keeping the things that she initially brought to the apartment, such as her clothes, accessories, shoes, bedding, and some kitchen appliances. Everything that was shared, such as dishes, furniture, and just about everything else, was being thrown out. I was shocked. She was tossing about 3/4 of the apartment, all the foods and spices included. I asked why she didn't want to sell or donate all the stuff, as some of the furniture looked brand new. She said she refused to take any of the bad luck with her, and she didn't wish it on anyone else. Therefore, it all needed to get dumped. Now, Amelia is from the Philippines, and I have relatives from the Philippines from my dad's side of the family. Much like a lot of other cultures, Filipinos can be deeply religious and very superstitious. Her logic was that if someone took some of that furniture from the dump, it wouldn't be on her conscience since she did not personally give it or sell it to anyone. We packed her things efficiently over the next couple of days, never once addressing the elephant in the room, Stacy's room. I peered into the room a few times as I walked by out of curiosity. The door was hanging off its hinges, the room was empty, and the single window opposite the door was wide open. On Sunday, Donna finally broke the silence and asked about the open window in Stacy's room. Amelia said that she was way too scared to go in there to close it. She began to fret about having to pay for the water damage to the wall below the window, as it had been raining on and off for the last few weeks. All the while, that window had been open. Stacy's family had come by to collect her things, but no one had thought to close the window. I shrugged and walked into the room to close the window myself, since Amelia, Donna, and Cheryl were too scared to do it. I noticed that inside the room was chilly, despite it being warm out that day. The vibe or energy in the room was so strange, heavy, and uncomfortable. As I said before, I'm part Filipino, and I was born and raised in Hawaii. Both sides of my culture can be very superstitious. One of the beliefs is that if you're entering a place that doesn't feel right because of a presence of some sort, you should just apologize, tell whatever it is why you're there, and let whatever it is know that it's not allowed to bother you. Under my breath, I said, "I'm so sorry for entering your space. I'm not here to intrude. I just want to close this window and I'll leave. You're not allowed to harm or follow me." I closed the window without difficulty and simply went about my business, finishing helping Amelia. Now, this is the point where things started going to complete and utter crap. We had been in Virginia and living there for a while without incident, but after helping Amelia move out of her apartment, things in our apartment began to go so far left. I began to have debilitating migraines. The migraines were not new, however. I used to only have the throbbing head pain and light sensitivity. But now, I was unable to move without throwing up. Any type of sound or light would cause me physical pain. I would have light auras so bad that my peripheral vision would be completely blocked out, and nothing but sleep would help. This was a catch-22 for me, because whenever I did sleep, I would be plagued by horrible nightmares. This was not the normal, occasional nightmare, though. It was every single night. Nightmares so bad that I would be shaking and inconsolable. I woke up a lot in my nightmares, only for something messed up to happen, causing me to jolt awake again in the nightmare. Rinse, cycle, repeat. It often seemed so real that I sometimes couldn't tell if I was asleep or awake. My mental and physical health was taking a beating, and at the time, I had no idea why. Then the knocking sounds began, all hours of the day and night. From the walls, from the ceiling, from the floor, things would disappear and end up in places that made absolutely no sense. Jason's things would get misplaced so frequently that he started accusing me of moving them. He felt there was no way that he would place his car keys in the fridge, nor would he ever put his work-issued phone in the sink, especially since waterproof phones were not really a thing yet. Lights would turn on or off. The volume on the TV would suddenly jump to eardrum-destroying levels if you walked out of the room. Several times the dishwasher would turn on, even though the door was not latched. There was one day that I was getting ready to do some laundry. I took a bunch of clothes hangers out of the closet and placed them on the bed before I walked out of the room to get the laundry out of the dryer. When I came back into the room, all the hangers were in the middle of the floor, just sitting there in 3 perfect stacks. Have you ever had clothing hangers fall off the bed and land in 3 perfect stacks? Because I sure as heck haven't. On another occasion, I had plans to clean the kitchen and walked into the kitchen to find the broom standing upright, as if playing sentinel or waiting for me. Sometimes when I took a shower, the shower curtain would pull open a few inches before closing again. Now, I understand that heat and steam can cause shower curtains to rise or sway a bit. However, this wasn't that. You could hear the rings sliding on the metal rod as it slid open halfway and then closed. Things like this happened to the both of us while we lived in the apartment. This isn't everything that happened while we lived there, but it was the most stressful for me. While it did stress me out, especially when I was home alone, Jason tried to be rational about it, saying things like, "The noises are just the neighbors moving around in their apartments," or "Sounds can travel through the vents from one apartment to another," or "The nightmares and migraines are from stress," or "faulty wiring." The following is the last event I'll share here, even though much more has happened in that apartment. This was definitely the most terrifying for me. Now let me say that Jason is always worried for my safety. Even when I'm home, he worries. It's just in his protective nature, and I know for a fact that he would never do anything to jeopardize my safety. At this point in time, I was so terrified of being in the dark and of the nightmares that I couldn't sleep without Jason in the room. If he weren't with me, I would panic if I could not see the whole room. Anyway, Jason had to leave the house every day around 6 a.m. to get to work by 8 a.m. because of traffic on northbound I-95. I would usually still be in bed when he left for the day, and he would always turn on the light in our closet, leaving the closet door cracked for me so that I would not freak out by waking up alone in the dark. It was mid-fall, and the temperatures would dip into the 40s. On this day, I woke up and almost had a panic attack, because I woke up in the dark. I immediately jumped out of bed and rushed to turn on the closet light. After taking a few minutes to calm myself, I frowned when I realized that our bedroom window was wide open. I closed it and checked my phone for the time. It read 5:50 a.m. Jason could still be home. With phone in hand, I opened the bedroom door and stepped into the short hallway, only to realize that every single light in the apartment was turned on. The guest bedroom, the hallway, the bathroom, the kitchen, and living room lights, all turned on. And to my complete and utter horror, every single window, the balcony door, and the front door were all wide open. Jason would never do something like that to me. Our apartment was on the 2nd floor, and the stairs were located directly in front of our door. That means if someone had come up those stairs with bad intentions, they would have had free rein to amble right up the stairs and straight into our apartment. I ran across the apartment, not caring about the stomping noises that I was making to close the front door. As soon as I closed the door, all the lights simultaneously shut off. I noped it out of there. Just me, my phone, and only wearing one of Jason's tall tees that I went to bed in. No shoes, no pants, no keys. I ran barefoot to the gym that was on the other side of the complex parking lot, where I sat inside and cried. I called Jason and hysterically told him what happened. He of course tried to console me, but I'd had it by that point. That was the absolute last straw for me. Needless to say, we did not live in that apartment much longer after the incident, just long enough to give the complex our 60 days notice and to find a new place. I also never stayed home alone after that if the sun wasn't up. I began to leave the house whenever Jason left. It did not matter if I had to sit in the parking lot until the sun came up. At night, I would go to work and hang around until Jason came home, even on my days off. Once we were out of that apartment, nothing ever happened again. Life went back to normal, but I've not really been the same ever since. I had told a close friend of mine about all these events, and he said that when I had spoken out loud in Stacy's room, it's possible that I didn't hold any conviction in my own words. Like, I said them, but I didn't really mean them. I have no idea if it was Stacy that was haunting me. Was her spirit lingering and followed me home? Was there something else in her room that was drawn to all the pain and suffering there because of Stacy's passing, and it just happened to latch on to me? Was it demonic? Was I experiencing a psychotic break and didn't realize it? I have no idea. I really and truly don't. All I know is that my path to hell began with the good intentions of wanting to help a friend by closing a freaking window. I lived in a haunted apartment. From Roseanator. This is a short story of one of the many events that took place in this building, but I still remember it clearly. Now, the building had shopping carts in the lobby to bring large loads of whatever to different floors. It had an old elevator too. I was around 12 years old, and I remember being called down to the lobby by my mom to bring up a load of groceries she had ready to go on a shopping cart. I was to bring it up to our apartment on the 4th floor, unload the food, then bring the cart back down. Being a music lover, I had just downloaded more songs to my unlimited playlist on my MP3 player, which I was thankful to have. I decided it would be a good time to listen to my new music, too loud for my ears. I put on my slippers and walked down the long hallway leading to the elevators. Down in the lobby, I got the groceries sitting in the cart my mother had left. I went back up in the elevator and still had the music way too loud. I started walking down the hall leading back to the apartment when suddenly, I felt 2 hands grab my shoulders and shake me, like someone was deliberately trying to scare me or get my attention. I laughed, thinking it was one of my cousins, so I whipped my head around to see nothing. No one was standing behind me. I took out my headphones and just stared blankly into an empty hallway. I almost ran back to the apartment, still pushing the shopping cart. I unloaded all the groceries and soon heard my mom coming back into the apartment. She reminded me that I now had to take the cart back to the ground floor. But I really didn't want to.